The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Thursday, the 11th of February, 2016, are currently trading with gold at $1,246.26 an ounce, silver $15.76 an ounce, Texas crude $27.45 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about 376 U.S. currency. Today in history, Monday, February 11th, 1929, Vatican City is made the enclave, or a city-state within another state, of Rome via the Lateran Treaty. Fascist Prime Minister of Italy at the time, Benito Mussolini, agreed to giving the Catholic Church financial support in return for public support from the Pope at the time. In recent news, the four remaining ranchers, Jeff Banta, Sean Anderson, Sandy Anderson, and David Fry at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon, who took control of the then-empty refuge 250 miles from Portland on January 2nd, demanding the return of the lands taken by the Bureau of Land Management and the pardoning of the two ranchers convicted of terrorism for setting controlled fires which spread to BLM lands, finally surrendered this morning after hours of negotiations with mediators. The occupation came to an abrupt end as Fry, the last to leave, threatened suicide on a live-streamed conversation with Liberty activist Gavin Seam and conservative radio host Chris Ann Hall. A phone call Wednesday night between the protesters and the negotiators was also live-streamed and is available online. A jury in Nassau County, New York, convicted James Ryan today on 10 of 13 counts of vehicular manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and other charges, and acquitted him of the top charge of aggravated vehicular homicide. He now faces up to 15 years in prison when he is sentenced next month because his reckless driving, prosecutors say, caused a chain reaction crash. Apparently, Ryan's Toyota hit a BMW on the Long Island Expressway and then was hit by another car. A few minutes later, an SUV smashed into Ryan's car before fatally hitting a New York police officer. The results for the New Hampshire primary are as follows. For the Republicans, Donald Trump won with 10 delegates, or 35.3% of the vote. Doug Kasich was next with 4 delegates and 15.8% of the vote. Ted Cruz, 3 delegates and 11.7% of the vote. Followed finally by George Bush with 3 delegates, 11%, and Mark Rubio with 3 delegates, 10.6%. For the Democrats, Bernie Sanders won 60.4%, or 15 delegates, while Hillary Clinton only got 38%, or 9 delegates. This was your lowdown for February 11th, 2016.
You're tuned to Truth News Radio Australia on the 13th of February 2016. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you on the show as a listener, and your perceptions and your understanding is part of the show, and I would like to warmly invite you to participate by getting back to me on anything that comes up in the show that you find interesting, and I'd like to invite you to leave your comments. Unfortunately, the Truth News Australia website commenting has actually been closed for most of the past 6 months due to some issues that are rather complex. But I will be opening the website for commenting again, and I'm quite keen to get discussion and to have your feedback as a listener. My name's Hereward Fenton, and Truth News Radio Australia is a completely home-spun original production, and it really is a weekly kind of journey into information that is somewhat obscured, suppressed, hidden, but nonetheless extremely important for our way of life and for knowing about what's really going on at a deeper level than the news ever gives you. Now, in today's show, I've got quite a lot of information to get through. I've got a massive stack of stories in relation to tyranny in Australia, and I just want to try and get through all of these articles, most of them which have popped up fairly recently. I often find there's kind of a clustering of this information that comes out, but when you put it all together, it is quite an amazing kind of shock to see what is really going on in our country with the encroachment on so many different levels and in so many different areas of life on basic freedoms. So I will be getting into that during today's show, but I want to just quickly address a story that has come up and a couple of other things that have just come up in the last few days that are very important, and I'm just going to run through my list here of top articles. John Rappaport, independent journalist who's been on this show before, has published an article where he has brought forth information in relation to the Zika crisis, which, as you no doubt know, has been blamed on, well, the cephalic small head clustering in Brazil has been blamed on the so-called Zika virus. But John Rappaport has actually done some research which shows that there is a connection with pesticides in Brazil. Now, I'm just getting that article up today. I'm just having a little trouble with my laptop today because I don't have my normal mic stand, and in order to open links from my document, I have to hold the control key down while holding the microphone, so that's a little bit difficult. Here we go. Not Zika, but Brazilian-Argentine doctors say pesticides. Why would a poisonous birth defect-causing chemical cause birth defects? That's the lead into this article. The manufacturer of the poison is a strategic partner of Monsanto. As I've been telling you all along, look to pesticides. The fake Zika story is a cover to protect the pesticide companies, among others. What do we know about the trumped-up Zika crisis? The actual number of microcephaly cases in Brazil is a gross unknown. At least 2 different groups are reporting different findings. Pick your number: 404 confirmed cases, 4,000 cases, or 9,000 cases. It turns out that in the US, estimates of microcephaly cases per year range all the way from 8,000 to 25,000. In other words, the researchers don't know what they're talking about. They're using different definitions of microcephaly. They are confused. They're also omitting highly relevant cases of birth defects, which don't, strictly speaking, fit any definition of microcephaly. This confusion applies to Brazil, the US, and anywhere on the planet. And in Brazil, researchers have only found a suggestion of the presence of the Zika virus in 17 cases of microcephaly. It makes far more sense to listen to what South American doctors are saying about the areas where birth defects are occurring. These would be doctors who actually care about what is destroying lives and the lives that are being destroyed. We have such reports passed along to us thanks to Claire Robinson of GM Watch. Here are quotes from her most recent article. Argentine and Brazilian doctors name larvicide as potential cause of microcephaly. A report from the Argentine Doctors Organization, Physicians in the Crop-Sprayed Towns, challenges the theory that the Zika virus epidemic in Brazil is the cause of the increase in the birth defect microcephaly among newborns. The increase in this birth defect, in which the baby is born with an abnormally small head and often has brain damage, was quickly linked to the Zika virus by the Brazilian Ministry of Health. However, according to the Physicians in the Crop-Sprayed Towns, the ministry failed to recognise that in the area where most sick people live, a chemical larvicide that produces malformations in mosquitoes was introduced into the drinking water supply in 2014. This poison, pyriproxyfen, is used in a state-controlled program aimed at eradicating disease-carrying mosquitoes. The physicians added that the pyriproxyfen is manufactured by Sumitomo Chemical, a Japanese strategic partner of Monsanto. Pyriproxyfen is a growth inhibitor of mosquito larvae, which alters the development process from larva to pupa to adult, thus generating malformations in developing mosquitoes and killing or disabling them. It acts as an insect juvenile hormone, or juvenoid, and has the effect of inhibiting the development of adult insect characteristics. The Argentine physicians commented, "Malformations detected in thousands of children from pregnant women living in areas where the Brazilian state added pyriproxyfen to drinking water are not a coincidence, even though the Ministry of Health places direct blame on the Zika virus for this damage." They also noted that Zika has traditionally been held to be a relatively benign disease that has never before been associated with birth defects, even in areas where it infects 75% of the population. Now, a public health researchers organisation, Abrasco, names pyroxyfen as a likely cause of the microcephaly. It condemns the strategy of chemical control of Zika-carrying mosquitoes, which it says is contaminating the environment as well as people and is not decreasing the numbers of mosquitoes. Abrasco suggests that this strategy is in fact driven by the commercial interests of the chemical industry, which it says is deeply integrated into the Latin American Ministries of Health, as well as the World Health Organization and the Pan-American Health Organization. Now, this article, this research here, illustrates something that we really need to reinforce in our mind, in our understanding, when we see a kind of an overlapping of issues that have at its heart effects on people that are extremely negative, that are health-related, that degrade people's quality of life, that are essentially abuses of human beings in various societies around the world. We see an overlapping set of interests between companies that produce chemicals, whether they be chemicals that are related to medicine or related to biotech, or indeed many other types of things. But what we see is that the companies that are profiting from chemicals have an incentive to sell those chemicals, and this does also apply to vaccines, and indeed, vaccines are another type of chemical. But what we see is that there is this commercial incentive to obviously sell more product. And so in the case of Brazil, we see that these chemicals have been sold through global multinational cartels, have ties into the Brazilian government, and there is where we get the next layer of the tangled web of deceit, because we have corrupt relationships between governments and these corporations, and there are always kickbacks, and this encourages a criminal mindset within bureaucracies. And so the pushing of potentially dangerous drugs and chemicals onto the environment has this double kickback for the companies and for the corrupt government officials. And then the next layer to this is when there is some kind of crisis caused by the criminal behaviour, i.e. the pushing of chemicals and toxic materials into the environment, we see another layer of cover-up where, in fact, the blame is pushed elsewhere, and in this case the blame pushed back onto a virus, which is part of the reason why the chemical was introduced in the first place, supposedly to control the virus. And next thing, they'll be trying to sell us a vaccine for the virus, which will be another layer of deception, which exhibits the deep and deeply disturbing nest of corruption that exists. And not just within Brazil, ladies and gentlemen, within every country in relation to this kind of pyramidal structure of insanely powerful multinational companies. Now, of course, the pesticide theory here is very important, and I think it looks certainly very relevant to what happened. But of course, last week we were talking about the Tdap vaccine, which had been made mandatory in Brazil just last year, and that also coincided with the microcephaly. But as you can see, this is another example. It's just the same type of thing. We could point the finger in many directions, but you've got to understand the underlying nest of corruption that makes all this possible. You're with Truth News Radio Australia. We're just heading to break. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Logos.
Of Earth, may I have your attention? This is Hereward Fenton, host of Truth News Radio Australia. You're invited to join the info war as we work to restore truth in media and challenge the dark forces which now dominate mainstream news. I'm calling on you, valued listener, to use your hard-earned dollars to help us smash the globalist empire. Visit truthnews.com.au and subscribe today. News Radio. And we were just covering there in the previous section the latest info on the microcephaly link to pesticides and the other proposed connections there with the Tdap vaccine. Now, of course, I don't profess to have any earth-shaking insights into this. Something else I want to mention, a story came up on CNN, of all places, this week, showing that the Tdap booster, which is the one that was mandated in Brazil and is also heavily recommended and pressured on people in Australia and most Western countries. If you're ever in close proximity to a small child, and I've got some interesting material to share with you on that, but the pressure to get one of these Tdap booster shots is verging on making it mandatory. I mean, the population, the average people, have been so brainwashed and so pressurised by the rhetoric, and also, you know, overly concerned parents, mothers with newly born children who take it upon themselves to go to great lengths to protect their children, have this tendency now to basically deny access to their baby if the relative or the friend has not had their Tdap booster shot. But this article here that popped up from CNN on February 5, 2016, says that the latest research shows that the Tdap booster shot protection fades fast. Its protection lasts no more than about a year. And this is extremely important because it completely undermines the whole principle of what they call herd immunity. And one of the reasons why they pressure so many people to get the vaccines is they say it creates herd immunity. Herd immunity being a situation where, because so many people are immune to a pathogen, that there will not be an epidemic because no one will ever get sick to start and spread it, right? Now, herd immunity actually does exist. It needs to be understood that a lot of vaccine skeptics say, oh, there's no such, herd immunity is ridiculous. No, it's not. Herd immunity is actually a very, very important principle. But herd immunity works when people are really immune, when they are truly immune. And the thing that vaccine researchers, that alternative vaccine researchers have been saying for many, many decades is that the type of immunity that is produced by stimulating antibody production in the way that vaccines work does not produce lasting immunity, is not the same. It does produce some effect. Of course, there is an effect. But the immunity that is produced is a reduced form of immunity, and its length, its lasting power is much, much weaker. So there is no herd immunity effect from people who have had vaccines against a particular illness. And this is particularly important in relation to whooping cough, because the little babies, the little 2-month-olds and less that are getting this and dying from it, because it's an extremely severe illness when you get it at that age, they're not getting the benefit of true herd immunity, which they would if there were no vaccine. And just think about that. Think about the paradoxical ridiculousness of the fact that introducing a vaccine has actually prevented the development of herd immunity. And this is factual now. I mean, this information now coming from mainstream sources, but they're not talking about the herd immunity problem. They carefully left that out of this article. But they're saying, can we make a better pertussis vaccine? What can we do about it? And they're saying maybe we should actually no longer mandate the Tdap booster, because it is actually mandated in the US as well. There are exemptions, but it's mandated. And it's going to be mandated in Australia sooner or later, let's face it. We're getting very close to that. But they're now saying, well, maybe it shouldn't be mandated since its effectiveness is so short-lived. And they're saying, well, either you're going to have it every couple of years, and of course, that's just going to massively increase the problems of complications and adverse effects. Or they're saying we don't mandate it at all, and we only recommend you to have the shot when we think there's about to be an epidemic. That's actually what they say in this article, when we expect one. Yeah, we think there's an epidemic coming next year, so you better get your shot now. That's how idiotic it has become in this voodoo science of vaccines. Now, that's about all I have to say on that topic for now. Just a couple more issues of global news that I want to raise with you. Julian Assange. Now, of course, we've done a lot of coverage of Julian Assange on this show. He went to the UN to have his case heard that he is a victim of arbitrary detention, and the UN committee which reviewed it, which is a very well-regarded, high-standing legal opinion, found that he is indeed a victim of arbitrary detention. But the powers that be have decided to basically spit on Julian Assange, and they've contemptuously rejected the findings of this UN Commission. They've called it ridiculous, and they're not honouring it. They're not even giving it lip service. And The Guardian, both The Guardian and the New York Times, have published poisonous editorial articles basically denying that Julian Assange is a victim of arbitrary detention, saying that he is destroying WikiLeaks, continuing to swirl the allegations of that he is a sex criminal, that there are rape allegations against him, and in fact, there are no rape allegations. There's nothing akin to rape in the allegations that have been made against him, and indeed they are only allegations. They're not actually charges. And the unwillingness of the Swedish prosecutors to actually come and interview him demonstrates the fact that what they're really trying to do is just keep him under wraps or extradite him to Sweden because they don't want him to run around free because they're being pressured. But this story is going to continue to unfold, and I'll get back into it and probably do another whole show on the WikiLeaks and the Julian Assange saga, because it really is an incredible illustration of the insanity of modern legalistic government machinations that just twist truth and lies, that just create false narratives and then do this kind of moral high horse thing where they go and say, oh, this person, he's been subjected to allegations of blah, blah, blah. He's been charged with this. He hasn't been charged with anything. There are no allegations from anyone who's actually a victim. The only allegations against Julian Assange are actually from the prosecutor. There are no victims. There's no rape victim in the Julian Assange case saying he raped me. It's an incredible story. Anyway, one more thing before I get into the meat of today's show. CSIRO boss defends shake-up, says politics of climate more like religion than science. Now, this story, quite surprising actually, and this is an ABC Australia article, is about a shake-up of the CSIRO, which is a premier science research organisation in Australia, where they have actually eliminated a huge number of jobs from within the organisation in relation to climate science. The CSIRO's chief has told the ABC that the backlash from his decision to restructure the organisation has made him feel like an early climate scientist in the 1970s. And he adds that there is so much emotion in the debate that it sounds more like religion than science. Isn't that extraordinary? Dr. Larry Marshall said he would not be backing down on his controversial shake-up of the organisation's climate divisions, telling the ABC he was yet to be persuaded. The redirection of climate science priorities at the CSIRO has drawn international condemnation, with thousands of climate scientists signing an open letter protesting the charges. 60 positions to go from the Oceans and Atmosphere Division. So, big deal happening there at the CSIRO, and it's very, very important because it indicates that there's a change of thinking. We're going to break with Truth News Radio Australia. Stay with us.
Should parents be fingerprinted to drop off their kids at daycare? Mississippi says yes, but only low-income parents are being targeted. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with more on this privacy rights issue next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
In Mississippi, low-income parents are getting an ultimatum at daycare centers. Give up your biometric data or do without daycare. Under Mississippi's program, parents who receive state subsidies for childcare must have all 10 of their fingerprints scanned, with no exceptions. Wealthier parents who can afford to pay for daycare don't have to do this. State officials are trying to justify this policy by saying that poor parents could be committing fraud, but they're applying the policy to the innocent as well, of course. So when did the working poor become suspects? No parent in America should be treated like a criminal just to get childcare. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
with Truth News Radio. And that article I was just reading to you there about CSIRO and the shake-up is extremely important, and I'm going to get back onto that and hopefully get someone on the show who can talk about more in terms of what this really means and what's perhaps going on inside the CSIRO. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and I'll put the link up on the show notes. But now, turning to our main topic for today, I want to kind of give you an overview of the deteriorating status of freedom and democratic principles in Australia, because it really is quite overwhelming. And I have a whole bunch of stories here, most of which have just come up fairly recently, but this is stuff that's been going on for many, many years. It's been evolving over many years, and it just keeps getting worse. It just keeps going downhill, and we seem to be picking up speed. And, you know, one wonders, where will it end? Where will it end, indeed? And I'm talking about the gradual stripping away, the erosion of basic freedoms and basic rights from individuals by law in Australia. And I want to begin by this article that was published actually on LinkedIn by Matt Barry, Chief Executive Officer of Freelancer.com. That's a major .com for freelancers in IT and other industries. And this guy, who's obviously a fairly successful businessman, has written this very, very long article with lots of information and statistics showing how Sydney's knee-jerk legislation to prevent alcohol-fueled violence is destroying the communities of just the normal people who used to enjoy nightlife in Sydney. It is basically turning Sydney entertainment districts into a wasteland. And it has reached such ludicrous proportions that, you know, it's even people now who don't normally talk about these things are coming out. We're seeing a reaction against this. This particular article is definitely worth a read. He actually blames it on the right-wing Christians who are in power in New South Wales. Now, while I do think there's an element of that, that has nothing to do with it, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I've got articles in relation to tyrannical legislation from all over Australia, from different state governments, both left-wing and right-wing. It has nothing to do with which side of politics you're on. It certainly has nothing to do with whether you're a Christian or an atheist or whatever. But it's a trend within our society. Now, in Sydney, it's become particularly bad. In New South Wales, the laws have been passed with the lockouts, preventing people from being able to go into a premise after 1:30 a.m, and with the alcohol purchasing laws that mean you cannot buy a bottle of wine after 10 p.m. anywhere in the state, which is just such a cruel and stupid and idiotic law that when I was last in Sydney, I got into a major argument with a guy in a pub, because I went to the pub thinking I'll just buy a bottle of wine to go with dinner, because I was having a late dinner, you know. And no, sorry, you can't do that. The pub's still open, the pub will be open until midnight, but no, you can't buy a bottle of alcohol after 10 p.m. Why? Oh, you can't be trusted. You can't be trusted to buy a bottle of wine. No, you can go into the pub, of course, and drink till closing time. For some reason that's okay, but buying a bottle of wine to take home is, no, we can't let you do that. Sorry, you're a naughty little boy. You know, this is legislation. This is where our country has come to. Now, that you may think, well, we could get all worked up about that and spend all our time just talking about that. But that is just one of so many things. And I will get back to addressing the vaccine issue again, because when you understand the breadth, the scope of the erosions of civil liberties in Australia, the vaccine issue is totally explained. You don't even need to get into the substantive matters about vaccines. You just say, oh, well, this is part of a trend. It's exactly part of a trend. It all fits in. We're going into a phase of society where the corporate government totalitarian partnership has decided to basically just squeeze, 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 squeeze. And it will be affecting far more aspects of your life than what you currently see now. And if you don't expect and see it coming, you'll be really shocked at what will come in a couple of years' time, because it'll be a lot worse than this. I mean, at the moment, what we're seeing is so many petty laws, so many invasions of our basic rights. But bank bail-ins are coming, ladies and gentlemen. They'll be taking your money out of your bank when the next banking crisis occurs, and it could be this year. They will be putting you, they will be basically owning you at some point in the future. And you'll look back at the life you had now, and it will seem idyllic by comparison. There are many, many levels, many, many steps down in this journey down the spiral staircase into hell. It's long and it's slow. And when you've gone down a long way and you look back up, and now we're in a stage where we've gone down about halfway, right? And we can look up and see where we came from. Now it's time to take stock. So I'm going to run through a bunch of these stories now with you. And I've just pulled these up, and they're in no particular order. Cyclists forced to carry photo identification and face fines under new rules. Now, there's some audio that goes with this. Let me just see if we can play this. And it is going to play an advertisement here. Here we go. Just waiting for that to start. Adult cyclists will be required to carry photo identification and fined 350% more for not wearing a helmet under new rules and penalties to be introduced by the New South Wales government.
Responding to complaints about cyclists openly flouting the law, the state government is jacking up the fines. From March next year, some fines will rise from $71 to more than $400. They include riding dangerously, running a red light and failing to stop at a pedestrian crossing. And cyclists will also have to carry ID.
Okay, just having a little trouble with the audio there. So, cyclists have to carry ID now. Why on earth would cyclists need to carry ID? It is just an arbitrary imposition of a rule for the sake of power. I mean, the legislation about helmets is already excessive. And in many countries, bicycle helmets are not mandatory. And a lot of research has shown that bicycle helmets do not provide the type of protection that makes them worthwhile. You know, that they don't provide full head protection. They don't prevent concussion. Remember I said that. Bicycle helmets do not prevent concussion. You probably thought that was the main reason you'd wear them. No. They do not prevent concussion. They're not like motorcycle helmets, which go right around your face and provide a solid kind of cocoon to cushion your head in the case that you bang it, right? Bicycle helmets do not do that. So the fines on bicycle helmets are ridiculous and outrageous, but now they've just introduced another level of totalitarian stupidity, which is requiring cyclists to carry ID. Anyway, move on, because we don't have time to go into these stories in too much depth. I just note them for you so you can go back and check it yourself. Picnic permits. Now, in Victoria, the councils have now brought in a system of picnic permits. That's right. If you have more than a certain number of people in a picnic, any number over 20 apparently, you have to have a permit and you'll be fined. That's right. Permits for picnics. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Easy.
In terms of creating wars is a mind manipulation technique called problem reaction solution. And it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You then report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they who have
Hi, welcome back. And talking about tyranny in Australia, and just talking here about the picnic licensing issue. There's an article here from The Age by Michael Short. Civil disobedience is needed when laws are stupid. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And that's a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. And he says here that American civil rights leader Martin Luther King shared a compelling antipathy to unfairness and injustice. So while it is clearly not a matter of existential angst or political outrage, a heavy-handed, gormless and money-grubbing decision by some councils overseeing a lot of Melbourne's most popular public parks would probably have irked these sterling public thinkers. Councils reckon that they have a right, and maybe they think they have a duty, to force families and friends to get a permit to have a picnic in a public park. should the gathering number more than 20. And 20 is a pretty small number, you could easily have a group that go over 20, And what this does, you see, this actually just opens the door to some new little money-grubbing, petty enforcement procedures, right? Because they have to enforce. Once they have a law, they have to enforce. So there'll be people going around in uniforms counting the number of people at picnics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 19, 20, 22. Oh, you're over there. We might let you off this time. But you're 22. You're 2 over the limit. Now, this is the way the actual enforcement, even if it doesn't involve a fine, becomes this hideous intrusion into people's normal enjoyment of their lives. But anyway, moving on, because there are far too many, that's just one. Let's not get all our knickers in a knot about it. Let's not have a Martin Luther King Million Man March over that, because there are 10 other things that we've got to have a Million Man March over, right? We can't just stay with one issue. A tattoo registry. Now, this is not actually in law yet, but it's been proposed from within the Queensland government from Gold Coast MP for Mermaid Beach, Ray Stevens, who put the proposal to State Parliament last Thursday, that there should be a registry of tattoos. And it would force people wanting tattoos to register their intentions with the government in an attempt to stop bikie-related tattoo parlours taking receipts for fake customers. Under the Health Act, there should be a register of people getting tattoos so that we can identify those people getting the tattoos. Yes. And I believe as part of the proposal, they would actually photograph the tattoo registry, and I believe a part of it, I can't actually see it in the article, but I know it has been done in other parts of the world where they photograph tattoos, and it's routinely done with people with criminal convictions, of course, and there are actually tattoo databases of people with criminal convictions which are used in the United States. But this is not, for criminals, this is not people who've gone to prison. This is just people who go to a tattoo parlour and want to get a tattoo. Your tattoo would be registered and probably photographed so that they can just track you wherever you go. The security cameras that watch you can identify you by the tattoo. And, you're just a normal person. You didn't break the law. But, hey, it doesn't matter, right? We need to clamp down on these people, and there are some little sacrifices that we all have to make. And this is the kind of stupid, hideous logic of the argument for totalitarianism and the greater good. It's all about the greater good, You're going to sacrifice a little bit of your freedom to make us all safer. Now, in relation to this story, there is actually a case, there is another law which I need to draw your attention to in Queensland specifically, because Queensland's a state where they brought in the most extreme bikie laws in the country, preventing gatherings of people known to be part of bikie groups, etc. But there is actually a law in Queensland that allows police to randomly stop individuals who have a tattoo which the police consider to be a gang tattoo. And they can do a strip search, and there is a case here, and it's on video, and I'll put it on the website, of a man who was searched, the car stopped, the police saw the tattoo of the man in the car, pulled the car over, and he was given a strip search. That's right. That's right, because he had a tattoo. That's fully legal. That's passed in through law. Now, I've got another story here, and this is a story from Sydney, and I don't think this is actually fully part of legislation, but the police are doing breath tests on pedestrians. There's an extraordinary video here. I don't really have time to play it, but there's a video here because it was all recorded. And 2 cops in a patrol car stop a couple who were just walking away from their car in a parking lot. Actually, they were walking back to their car. The guy who was breath tested had not been driving. There was certainly no proof the police had that the guy was driving, and they didn't say it was about driving. They just said we're testing pedestrians. That's actually what happened. And the guy refused and had a bit of a standoff with them and just walked away, and they didn't actually pursue it. But wait, there's more. The New South Wales Police now patrol public pools with sniffer dogs. An image of police using sniffer dogs at the popular Andrew Boyd Charlton public pool in Sydney is currently going viral, drawing criticism from people saying that it's one step too far in the city's war on drugs. Now, there's a photo here, and it is really quite grotesque. I mean, these Nazi-looking police with their dogs, all dressed in black, parading past these people who are just sunbathing, and the dog is giving them a good sniff up, right? And this is all completely legal. Why is it legal? Well, it all started about 15 years ago. It started actually just before the Olympic Games in Sydney, when they said we need to clean up the streets of Sydney to improve our image for the Olympic Games. We want to bring in sniffer dogs in certain restricted areas. And they did bring in sniffer dogs for public bus stops and a few other places. But then after that, they just expanded the program. And pretty soon they were going into licensed premises. And if you've ever spent time in inner Sydney, you'll see the police go in to these places all the time with their sniffer dogs in a place that specifically bans dogs. I mean, you're not allowed to bring dogs into licensed premises, but the police have an exemption for that. And they just walk around sniffing everybody up, and people have been strip searched inside pubs in Sydney. This has been going on for years. But now this image of the police doing it at a swimming pool is just par for the course. Of course they can. But guess what? That's nothing. Because soon they'll be able to do it in your home, ladies and gentlemen. Because in the ACT, and we're moving on to another story now, in the ACT, the police have been given power to enter homes without permission to test suspected drink drivers. New ACT laws have closed a loophole that previously allowed drink drivers to avoid being breath tested by giving police the right to enter homes without permission. That's right. If the police suspect you may have been drink driving, and there's no specific time frame there, it's not like you got out of the car and went straight into your house. They just suspect you've been drink driving for whatever reason. They can test you for alcohol. They can also test you for drugs. Now, if they suspect an offence has been committed, it's not just drink driving. Sorry, it's not just drink driving. If they suspect an offence has been committed, so for whatever reason, if your next door neighbour rings the police and says, I think the guy next door has been smoking his bong, they can come in. So they will be coming into your home with dogs. Expect it. Get ready for it. Sniffer dogs will be coming into people's homes. Okay, now another story here, and that's related to the tattoo issue, where the police actually drew a taser on the man with the neck tattoo, but we won't go back to that. Okay, I want to talk a little about the whooping cough vaccine, because there is a lot of talk about the whooping cough vaccine becoming mandatory for friends and family. And I've got here a pregnancy website where so many people are commenting and quite proudly and self-righteously up on the little high moral high horse saying that, I didn't let anyone come and see my baby until they'd had all the vaccine shots. Because they're so proud of themselves, these idiots, right, who are brainwashed by corporate propaganda that helps make money for large corporations while making them sick. They're so proud of themselves, and they're so proud of the little power trip that they can get on when they can stop, Uncle Jim from coming to visit his nephew because he didn't get the shot, the booster shot. And this is on pregnancy website here, whattoexpect.com. Now, there are a bunch of other stories here, but I don't really have time to go with them all. Strip searches are now routine in New South Wales. I mean, strip searches. They're basically just walking through the street, and they're doing this with the sniffer dogs, but they're basically just stopping people and strip searching. I've actually seen it happen in Sydney myself. So I'll be getting back to a lot of these issues and cover some of them in more depth in future shows. All of these links are going up on the website. I'll be glad to hear from you and hear about your thoughts. And with Truth News Radio Australia, we'll be back next week. See you then. Truth News Radio on the 6th of February 2016. My name's Hereward Fenton. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, ladies and gentlemen. And today I'm going to be taking a rather devious course in today's show. I want to probe into disinformation, a concept that we often look at on this show, and one which I try to elucidate because it's a very, very important word to understand when you are trying to get to the truth. It's increasingly important in the era of the internet. It always has been important because disinformation has always been a tactic of warfare and propaganda, because keeping people misinformed is one way of controlling them. But in the age of the internet, where the sources of information now are almost infinite, or not infinite, but obviously massively huge because of the 6.5 billion people on this planet and the access to computers, every human being acts as a potential node to transmit information. And when you have centralised control structures which are trying to limit the flow of information, trying to keep people in a bubble of a false narrative about the world, the only effective means that they have of preventing people from finding out what's really going on is to flood that medium with so much information or misinformation or conflicting, contradictory information that you are still forced to turn to accepted authorities to know what is true, because otherwise you will just be totally confused. For every proposition, there will be a conflicting proposition, and you will therefore not be able to make any decision at all. Thus, flooding the internet with disinformation is very, very important. And we mustn't underestimate the efforts that the powers that be would go to do that, because controlling your mind, controlling the way you think is extremely important to them. And I think we often underestimate that. But just consider the amount of money that's spent on the mainstream media, much of it going out on broadcast television, going out on media that is free to access. And the amount of money behind that is absolutely staggering. The amount of money that is spent on advertising, the amount of money that is spent on entertainment. And what do the powers that be get back for that? Well, they get back something very important. They mould public opinion. And part of that is advertising, and advertising has always been the essential ingredient of the media, to make you buy products, to make you choose between a spectrum of products that are created by very, very large cartels, so that the free market cannot exist. That, of course, is a very, very important part of the corporatist agenda behind mainstream media, just to make you a passive consumer that's locked within their net, that can never get out of their net, because they offer you all the choices and they make it cheap and easy for you to basically absorb their information. In most cases, it's completely free, like you just turn on your television set and there it is. Now, within all that, as the internet has grown and developed, what has actually developed, I believe that there are two types of disinformation which are quite important to understand. I'm sure we could identify many other subtypes of disinformation, but the two that I want to focus on in today's show are the disinformation that is associated with the flow of information that comes out of mainstream mouthpieces. This is what we might call mainstream disinformation. And I'm going to be going into an example of that in a lot more detail in this show. And disinformation is put into mainstream news often because they don't want people to know what is really going on about a certain topic, or they want to control the narrative on a certain topic to lead you away from making the correct conclusions. And this is usually to protect corporate interests. And, of course, governments and corporations are essentially the same thing. So when I say corporate interests, I also mean government interests. Basically, the interests of the super rich and the super powerful against the interests of the 99.99% of humanity, who they seek to control. So this type of disinformation is pretty easy to understand. You could simply just call it propaganda. Often it has elements that are factually correct, of course, but the disinformation is there to constantly lead you in a particular direction and to lead you away from certain directions that they don't want you to go in. Now, I want to talk now a little about another type of disinformation, and I'll call this alternative media disinformation, because it is a type of disinformation which is different, and I believe has a different objective, and which is commonly found in alternative news sites. And by alternative disinformation, what I actually mean is theories and claims, sometimes theories, sometimes assertions, sometimes claims made by anonymous sources that are quite extraordinary and, if true, would be quite earth-shaking, but which hold within them contradictions or impossible statements, logical contradictions, flaws in reasoning, typically a lack of verifiable evidence. And the key thing that unites this group of disinformation is it makes assertions which are likely to be divisive, which most people will probably reject because most people can see through flawed reasoning and statements that lack evidence, but which will create a division within groups of people because a certain minority of people, and often a minority of people who are more passionate and more, shall we say, more emotionally reactive and sensitive, will often leap onto, and that will then lead to conflicts between people who would otherwise be together on a particular topic or you know, in a general view of the world. And this divisive effect is very, very powerful. And I'm going to talk about a couple of examples of that, one of which, of course, my listeners will be quite familiar with because I've talked about it on the show many times, which is the one about chemtrails. And I've got an article which popped up on my news feed today, which really, to me, is a almost textbook example of chemtrails disinfo. And I want to read a bit from it. I just want to make it very clear that I'm not promoting this article. I'm using it, I'm studying it, and I want to help you to understand the nature of internet disinformation. Of course, for those who aren't up to speed on this, chemtrails theory erupted in the round about the turn of the millennium, with a few individuals coming forward saying that the US government was spraying through high-altitude aerosol dispersion agents which were creating persistent contrails. And the claims that were made at that time were that this was a brand new thing that had never been seen before and that it might be being used for geoengineering or perhaps to drug people and a variety of other things. Now, the claims about persistent contrails, the claims about chemtrails being somehow unique and that they are somehow different to normal aircraft contrails is something that I've gone to in great length on this show, and I don't want to just go over that ground because it takes too long. I do encourage you to have a look at my website, put in chemtrails keyword search, or put in contrail science in Google, and you'll come to a website there that debunks a lot of the claims of the chemtrailers. But bear in mind, I'm not tying myself to anything else that may come out of those websites. If you look at the Contrail Science website, you'll see that it's run by a guy who basically disparages all conspiracy theories, and so I certainly don't tie myself to him. I simply think his analysis of the specific contrail claims are correct. But if you do go to contrailscience.com, you're probably likely to come across the rhetoric that you'll find on that site from other people posting, which is tending to lump all conspiracy theorists together. And indeed, this illustrates my point about why chemtrails is such a successful disinformation strategy, because by introducing a debunkable theory into the general population of what we might call conspiracy communities, and it being eagerly lapped up by so many people within those communities, it then becomes very easy for sites such as Contrail Science and the other one, Metabunk, which is run by the same guy, to lump all of them together, including the 3,000 engineers and architects who've analysed the collapse of the World Trade Center and based on very, very detailed studies and peer-reviewed research, have come to conclusions which contradict the official view of 9/11. Now, the people who run Metabunk are able to just lump everyone together and say all these people, all these conspiracy theorists chemtrailers, the 9/11 truthers, see, they're all the same, and they can focus on the chemtrailers, and they can debunk the chemtrails so easily. And anyone who reads that and then will just follow the extrapolation that people who are lumped together with that because all the conspiracy communities are mixed up will very easily be able to put forward the meme that all conspiracy theories, in quotes, are equally ridiculous and can be debunked. When we come back from the break, I will go into this in more depth, and I'll give you some analysis of one particular article which I think really highlights the disinformation technique which is embodied in the chemtrails meme. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break.
Electors now.
Women of Earth, may I have your attention? This is Hereward Fenton, host of Truth News Radio Australia. You're invited to join the info war as we work to restore truth in media and challenge the dark forces which now dominate mainstream news. I'm calling on you, valued listener, to use your hard-earned dollars to help us smash the globalist empire. Visit truthnews.com.au and subscribe today. With Truth News Radio, and I'm talking today a little about disinformation. Starting off here with chemtrails, and I'm going to be leading into some other topics which are far more relevant to what's going on in the news right now. Let me just expand on this a little before I go into this article I want to read to you. I want to say that I recognise that my position on this is quite different to many of the so-called leading lights in alternative media. And I know that, and it's been the cause of a lot of difficulty and consternation for me that I have to have this position. But it is absolutely necessary for me to follow the principles that this show is based on, which is using evidence and reason and logic, rather than simply falling into a groupthink view. Because, you know, XYZ alternative health websites and leading radio hosts think that chemtrails is a real thing. You know, I've looked at it. I spent a lot of time looking at it. I spent a lot of time trying to find the evidence for it. And I just keep coming back to conjecture, subjective assessments, anonymous sources, complete lack of evidence. And it just, in the end, you are forced to realise that this is a false meme. And it does make one a little suspicious of those who are continuing to promote it. But I don't want to go down the route of using this show to denounce other people in alternative media. I've never done that. That's never been my modus operandi. And that, because that's a divisive thing to do, you see. And division, I believe, is part of what the people who create this disinformation want to achieve. So by going down the route of denouncing other people and getting into giant flame wars about it on websites or whatever is probably just what they want. I mean, I have actually engaged in some pretty heated debates on it on Facebook, but I've not used this show as a platform for attacking any individuals who have these views, because I do believe for the most part it is simply genuinely believed. And I try to simply point out why it's wrong. And, you know, I'm not actually trying to say that I have a godlike level of knowledge or that I am blessed with some deeper ability to see truth than other people. I use methods that anyone can use to investigate a problem. And, again, I refer you to the material on my website, which is already there. And you'll certainly have enough to go on to make your own determination on this. And what follows now is kind of my analysis of an article titled Aerosol Experiments Using Lithium and Psychoactive Drugs Over Oregon. And this is published on a website called positivehealth.com by Anne Phillimore, PhD. Now, the headline is quite startling, and I was startled enough to sort of click on the link from Facebook and have a look at this. And then I saw immediately, okay, it's a chemtrails article. And they've got a photo there of some streaky cirrus clouds. And I immediately realised, okay, this is going to be another one of those type of stories. But I thought I'll read it and I'll see what it's got, if it's got any information. Is there anything in the article to really back up the shocking headline? And as I kind of expected, it does not. I'll just read to you a little from it. Okay, the article starts with this photograph, and it says, under the caption, it says, "Looking west as the sun sets, taken after a heavy day of spraying, during which the symptoms of lithium exposure were intense. This is what the chem bomb dispersal looks like as it spreads out. Using the prism spectrum effect, it can be ascertained in the sunset light that this cloud is full of lithium." Now, it's just a photograph of a streaky cirrus cloud. And that caption there is typical of the whole tone of this article. It's just it's injecting vast assumptions into the reader's mind with not a shred of anything that sounds like evidence. Now, the article then begins with a quote from a professor of climatology. "I can't imagine stratospheric aerosols ever being deployed. You can't test it unless you basically do full-scale deployments. I can't see the world standing for that." Okay, it's just a statement made by a professor. Okay, now we'll just move forward. It says here, "But full deployment has been achieved." This is just a bold statement. That's how the article begins. "But full deployment has been achieved. It is not being done in secret. You have only to look up at the sky to see it, all over the world. It is simply being done without your permission. Testing the results of this poisonous aerosol spraying has become the purview of thousands of scientists who find themselves co-opted into programs with super security coverage. All of a sudden, an ecologist who had been hired to collect samples in riverways for effluvia is assigned to sample for aluminium, barium, lithium, and mercury, and the test results are instantly classified as secret." I quote from Elena Freeland's introduction to her book, Chemtrails, HAARP and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. "The subterfuge surrounding geoengineering is thick as molasses." Okay, so that's just a quote from a book. And again, there's nothing here. It's well written, though, and a person coming upon this in a trusting manner and without a tuned, trained, critical mind can easily be slipping in. This is what happens is you slip in because the author of this is taking such an adamant position, and it is obviously a moral high ground position as well, that you want to fall in line with it. You feel drawn into it. And this is what they're doing. Now, of course, I wouldn't be taking this position if the article began with a simple presentation of facts, a humble presentation of facts, which is what you need in these types of cases. In any case of contamination, in any case of chemical contamination, it's very important to humbly present the evidence, because you can't just be expected to be believed. But people who are out to deceive you often have this technique of jumping up on the high horse and making very profound, ominous statements that you feel you either have to trust or completely reject. And most people want to trust because they want to feel that there is something that they can hang on to, that they can belong to. And so you're drawn in. You're drawn in to the meme. Now, the article continues with a general overview of geoengineering, and most of it's just conceptual and speculative. But in one paragraph here, the author returns to making bold assertions about the chemtrail spraying. Different chemical mixes produce varying types of trails and clouds, wide giant lines, thin short lines, fast dispersing sprays, chem bombs that turn to a haze are sprayed day and night in order to maintain the plasma battery in the stratosphere. Plasma battery, see? This is bringing in the HAARP conspiracy into it. Okay, we're just going to break. I'll continue with this analysis. Now, I'll get into the actual part where she starts talking about lithium when we come back. You're with Truth News Radio Australia. Do not go away.
wipe that grin off your face. States across the U.S. are officially forbidding people from smiling when they get their driver's license photos taken. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back to tell you why the long faces at the DMV. Next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
If you're applying for a driver's license in a growing number of U.S. states, don't even think about smiling. A big grin in your photo is now considered illegal. That's because smiling defeats the software they use to map and measure people's features for facial recognition. Officials say they're preventing identity theft by comparing new license photos with existing ones. But of course, once they've got your scowling mug in their database, they can use it to track you. All police need to ID you in a public place is to snap your picture on the street and compare it against what's on file. How long does that take? The answer, 1 second. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
May not actually be kidding about chemtrails.
With Truth News Radio. Now, the author of this article is basically proposing that the chemtrail spraying that she's been experiencing involves lithium, and that there's also some kind of electromagnetic harp thing going on, producing a harmonic frequency that's aimed specifically at females. I mean, it sounds crazier and crazier as you read it, but this article is very well written. And I guarantee you that a percentage of people, probably women, will read this and they'll just take it on board. You know, they'll just take it on board, they'll absorb it. It won't really be questioned or criticised, and that then becomes the germ of, as I said, creating discord within the community of people who really need to be united, folks. You know, the people really need to be united about the real and serious threats to freedom and the real and serious contaminants that are being put into our environment and injected into us. So this is a very, very serious issue. I'm not just raising it for a bit of a joke. So the lady who wrote this article believes that she got diarrhoea as a result of the chemtrail spraying. She says, in the summer of 2014, I got diarrhoea. And she says that her dog also had diarrhoea. And she then posted requests on Facebook to find out other people who had diarrhoea. And she found 100 people replied over a 3-month period saying they had diarrhoea. Almost entirely women, with only a few exceptions, were having sudden onset diarrhoea. So women and dogs. A sensation of wooziness, a walking on the moon effect, and hunger pains, ear pain, and pains in the back of the teeth, and sinus agony. Now, she says the key factor came to me from a lady who took her sick dog to a vet. The vet couldn't find anything physically wrong with the dog and quickly made the diagnosis that the big dog's ears were affected. She said the dog was seasick. That's what it says. The dog was seasick. Seasickness is not a joke. When you are truly seasick on a boat, there comes a moment when you wish for the boat to sink so the misery stops. Fiddling with the inner ears can quickly bring you to your knees as it interrupts the brain's spatial cognition and you lose all sense of reality. Now, what's the point of all this? Well, in the second paragraph here, she hits you with it. Oregon was being hit with not only chemtrail spray containing a possible germ or virus, but also a harmonic frequency, which was aimed specifically at females. Okay, so that's just, again, a completely bald assertion. There is not one shred of evidence other than she put a request on Facebook over an over 3-month period. People said they'd had diarrhoea and they were female. So can you see the hopelessness of this article? The sheer catastrophe of reasoning embodied in this writing. Now, it's not over, because she now goes on to conclude that there was lithium being sprayed upon her, as well as the harmonic frequency energies, which created the diarrhea and the seasickness in the dog. She says she began receiving reports by email, telephone and over Facebook that folks were complaining about very specific symptoms, and she realised that these symptoms, which were lethargy, thirst, weight gain and muscle pain, could only be caused by one thing. You see, she had done an internship for drug rehabilitation many long years ago, and she realised that all these symptoms that people were complaining about, intense lethargy, thirst, weight gain and muscle pain, were caused by lithium. And so that's why she wrote the article saying that aerosol experiments using lithium and psychoactive drugs over Oregon. See, that's the basis of her research. The article then goes on to document a purported whistleblower's correspondence, and this actually goes into some other topics, but apparently some person called Locke sent her a series of letters, and she's got a quote here. I'm not sure if this is from the so-called whistleblower, but this is an anonymous whistleblower. We'll never be able to confirm it anyway. But under the photograph here it says, lithium-spraying planes often leave what are called short, fast, dispersing, non-persistent trails. They resemble the old, now non-existent contrails. These short trails spread widely into a murky haze that fills the entire sky. Okay, and this whistleblower, she says, has confirmed her belief about the lithium. And anyway, it's quite a long article. It goes on and on and on. But there is nothing in it other than, photographs of clouds, an anonymous whistleblower. And they aren't even really direct quotes from the whistleblower. They're just sort of paraphrases. Well, here's what she says, a direct quote. I could have warned thousands of people of the ongoing spraying to manufacture air stagnation of the rogue Umpqua valleys, as well as much of the Oregon coast south of Florence. The artificially induced period of air stagnation is part of a larger experiment testing the efficacy of psychoactive chemical dispersal from higher altitudes. Currently, spraying is most intense along the coast itself and above inland valleys. The stagnant air currents in the region allow for more direct application of psychoactive agents to test populations. I have little formal contact with the chemistry department, but to my knowledge, lithium is the primary substance being dispersed in the aforementioned experiment. So anyway, I'll leave that with you. The point to understand here is that this type of article it's nonsense, right? But it's well written. It's quite well presented. It's not done in that total amateurish way that we often see. And I really believe that it's being done for mischievous purposes. I believe that people who wrote this, I don't believe it's genuine. So I believe most people who believe in chemtrails are genuine, but this is so deviously concocted that it looks to me like a disinfo meme being injected into the community. And I want to just turn now quickly to another one which has actually popped up in recent years and has been the source of great derision on the mainstream, which is the so-called flat earth believers. Now, this is quite recent because, I did some searches on this a few years ago because I was just curious, and very little came up. Because, see, people always accuse those who have radically different views or people who don't believe in mainstream science on any particular topic as being flat earthers. In other words, it's the epitome of stupid, right? And, of course, to have people actually claiming the earth really is flat and to have groups and websites claiming it would be an ideal disinfo meme. And it wasn't there, but just in the past couple of years, it's suddenly exploded. And there are now groups popping up, and there is a Flat Earth Society, right? I mean, that was just a joke concept. You know, do you belong to the Flat Earth Society? People used to say it for a joke. There now actually is a Flat Earth Society. But I believe that is a disinfo group, probably, again, now full of wide-eyed believers. We're coming to a break. I'll be right back. Stay with me.
Functioning.
What happens in terms of creating wars is a mind manipulation technique called problem reaction solution. And it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You then report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they... Hi, welcome back. You're with Truth News Radio Australia. Now, I was talking about the chemtrails, and I'm reading to the article there about the chemtrails. I just want to briefly mention this article, Is the Earth Flat? This is from express.co.uk, a mainstream media source. There are many websites you can go to look at the details. I just thought I'd briefly refer to this mainstream media coverage. Is the Earth flat? Thousands believe madcap theory that the world is really a dome-topped disc. Now, amazingly, thousands of people are reverting back to the age-old theory that the globe is more a diorama, with a hardcore among them adding the cherry on top that it is capped with a glass dome that prevents us from leaving. Now, these websites really exist. They are, as I said, frequented probably by a lot of people who genuinely believe it. And this article is very derisive, sort of humorously, having a look at it. Indeed, the belief in a flat Earth is something that can be easily refuted. Right? There's a number of ways you can do it. You can get on a plane and you can just keep flying in the same direction and you come back to where you started. That's, to me, a pretty good indication the world is actually round. I've done that a couple of times. I've actually been around the world. If the world was flat, you wouldn't be able to do that. The problem is, with the society disintegrating as it is, with so much lying going on, the propensity of people to feel that they're being tricked and deluded is increasing. So a lot of people are actually just reaching out at whatever they find and believing it as an alternative to believing the mainstream, not understanding and not realising that this is being actually fed to them as well, that the alternative media is also feeding them false information. And that's just the key thing to take from this, is that the alternative media is feeding you false information because the alternative media is infiltrated by the same people who run the mainstream media. It shouldn't come as a surprise. It's inevitable that would happen. I think it happened slower than many of us might have thought. I think it took a while for them to get up to speed with it. It kind of began with all of those books about the Kennedy assassination, where people were making more and more wild and ludicrous claims. And that was actually before the internet era. But because the Kennedy assassination, clearly the facts do not match the official viewpoint, and the core dissenting views as put forward by Jim Garrison and some of the early books on the topic are very hard to refute, that there was more than one shooter. What they had to do is that they had to flood the media with more and more wacky ideas. That the driver turned around and shot JFK. He just pulled a gun out and shot JFK right in front of Jackie. That the Zapruder film was actually altered, and the mafia did it, and various different groups were involved in it, and it just gets more and more complicated. And some of those views have little bits of truth in them, but they just go towards obfuscating the most basic facts. So that's alternative media disinformation. But let's have a look now. Let's have a look at mainstream media disinformation, because that's actually quite interesting too, and extremely important, because right now
and I want to look at the Zika virus disinformation campaign, because this is, and this actually has a correlate in the alternative media as well. The mainstream media Zika virus disinformation campaign holds it that Zika virus is the cause of microcephaly, which is small brain, as a type of brain damage that occurs in the womb, and the children are born with a shrunken head. Now, when you look up Zika virus and you probe into it, you find there is no history of Zika virus being associated with microcephaly. There is no correlation whatsoever. When you look up the causes of microcephaly in any of the established medical information pages on the internet, Zika virus is certainly never mentioned. What is mentioned is toxins are a potential cause of Zika virus, of this syndrome. Phenylalanine is known to be a cause of microcephaly. And phenylalanine, interestingly, and I'm not sure if this is important, but you'll find that phenylalanine is associated with aspartame, which is a sugar alternative. The amino acid in aspartame, which creates the illusory sense of sweetness, is actually phenylalanine. And if phenylalanine builds up in the body to a toxic concentration, it can actually cause this type of brain damage. But there is no association of Zika virus with this problem. And Zika virus has always been described as a mild illness, not a serious illness. It simply causes a bit of a skin rash and a mild fever. But some of the patients with the deformed babies had Zika virus in their blood, and instantly that became the meme. But if you actually follow it, this is the meme that the mainstream media adopted, but if you actually follow it and research it yourself, you find that they have no evidence. I mean, you look at the pages, I'll put them up on my website, you can double check it. There is no evidence, or theory even, as to how Zika virus caused this. And we know that toxins can cause this. Toxicity is the first most likely reason why this would have occurred. This type of brain damage is a typical case of some sort of environmental toxin. But as we've seen with other cases in the past, the medical industry always jumps to virus before toxicity as the solution. Sometimes to mask a real problem, sometimes because it is convenient to do so, because there is a vast industry based on virus research and the development of vaccines. And we saw this happen with HIV, and I've done shows on that, and I may go back to recap some of the HIV material. But because HIV clearly was, the AIDS illness was quite clearly identified as a toxicity problem in the early days. And then it was railroaded into a virus theory, and then those few dissenting scientists were basically just snubbed out, who stayed with where the evidence led them, which was that it was actually a toxicity matter. Now, many alternative websites have also jumped up on the bandwagon of virus, and they're calling Zika a bioweapon. And again, this is another type of disinformation that is being used by the alternative media to basically hype up or ramp up certain conspiratorial fears about how the elite are engineering viruses as bioweapons to depopulate the planet. And this type of disinformation, again, has the same effect of, because it's got no evidence behind it, and it has this effect of discrediting alternative research. Whereas the mainstream disinformation has the effect of making the general public believe in this virus concept. And, of course, this will be used, it's being used for a number of ways already. There will be vaccines will be coming out for it. There will be vast amounts of research money spent on this so-called virus, all without any prima facie evidence that this virus could ever cause what they're claiming it to cause. And they're also going to extend now the claim that the virus is actually causing Guillain-Barré syndrome. And there are articles, which I'll put all on the website, that are claiming that Zika virus is causing Guillain-Barré syndrome, when we know that Guillain-Barré syndrome is a known adverse effect of vaccines. We know that. It's been proven in the past. But see, they're trying to draw Zika virus into the causal explanation for something that is possibly caused by a vaccine adverse effect. And of course in Brazil, and this has been discussed on a number of sites, the Tdap vaccine was issued just 12 months before these birth defects appeared as a mandatory vaccine in Brazil. So the mainstream media disinformation, drawing you into the belief about Zika virus, is basically to draw you away from making the connection between Tdap vaccine and these birth abnormalities. Now, I'm not claiming that Tdap vaccine caused these abnormalities. I don't know. But the evidence points to an environmental toxicity issue. Whether that's a vaccine, aspartame, or something else, we don't know. That is my show for this week. It has been a great pleasure talking to you. I will be back on this topic very soon. Stay with us. Truth News Radio Australia, signing out.